What's up, guys? Michael James with Beyond the Forbidden. Do you want to receive extra content that's not viewed anywhere else? Support Beyond the Forbidden on Patreon to receive plus content that is only exclusive to members of Beyond the Forbidden. Content like the full 2-hour podcast, bonus shows, full-length video interviews, behind-the-scenes footage with guests, and much more. So what do you have to lose? Go to patreon.com/Beyond the Forbidden. That's patreon.com/Beyond the Forbidden. And become a member of Beyond the Forbidden for just $5 a month. And also check the description for the links.
And I think people in this country, Mike, are going to have to start facing the question and doing a deep dive on it and thinking deeply about it. You know me, I'm an anti-federalist, and as far as I'm concerned, the Constitution, as Michael Savage likes to call it, the Philadelphia Convention of 1787 was, in my opinion, and you can read the Anti-Federalists at the time, it was a coup d'etat. And it was only the Anti-Federalists that forced the Floundering Fathers, Alex Hamilton and James Madison, being the two principal ne'er-do-wells of the Federalist Party, that forced the Bill of Rights on them. And, I call it the Bill of Afterthoughts, because that's what it is. These people that set up this constitutional republic set it up to be an oligarchy, and the Anti-Federalists told them that at the time, and here we are. 250 years later in this failed experiment, here we are, and all of Elbridge Gerry and Patrick Henry's prognostications and predictions have come home and are squatting like the elephant in the room that everyone's trying to ignore. So I think that was step one. The second step in getting to this position was Abraham Lincoln, and this idea of the Union as a suicide pact, that once you're in, you can't get out, no matter how bad things are.
Traps.
Yeah, and thank you, Glenn Beck, for the observation that the Union is not a suicide pact. Thank you, Abraham Lincoln.
So it's kind of like a new world. So it was like an old world before the Constitution, old world feudalism, and they just made it into a new world order of feudalism.
Well, this is the other thing. The Constitution itself, which again, I'm an anti-federalist. It's a tremendously flawed document. However, if you look at the changes that have been made to it, we no longer have state legislatures selecting the senators, which I think was a big mistake, because what that old process did is it made the senators quite literally ambassadors of their state. And that if you look at the southern states when they secede, you have people like Jefferson Davis, who at the time was a senator from Mississippi. They go to the Congress of the United States and surrender what they surrender their credentials. So in other words, it's like an ambassador going to a foreign country that's been recalled, surrendering his credentials to that country, that he's no longer the representative of the government. Well, this is the way they viewed themselves. With the change of election of senators to popular vote, that's another blow against the idea that this is a union of sovereign states, rather than what we have now, which is this whatever it is, this banana republic of a federal enclave surrounded by reality.
Man, and you're right. This is becoming, it has became over the years, been in the making of a banana republic. And my grandfather,
like with nukes.
Yes. Banana nukes. But my grandfather told me, and this is going to kind of go into what we will be discussing. My grandfather always told me, Joseph, and he wasn't as smart as you, but he always told me that the downfall of Rome was the lack of morality.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So I see an airy, and this was crap 30 years ago.
It's
I see an airy reality now.
I'll go a step further. It's not just a collapse of morality. It is typical of periods of collapse where there is a focus on irrationality, irrational systems of quote unquote thought, and the other thing that's very noticeable in periods of collapse is sexual confusion,
Yep.
or as we like to call it today, gender confusion. But I'm old enough to remember when on government forms they would have a little box, sex, male or female.
Or
And 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 when in the 70s and 80s they changed the word sex to gender, I I have to tell you, I to toot my own horn, I told people at the time, this is Gnosticism that they're trying to put into place. Because gender is a linguistic property, it is not a biological property. If you study Latin or Greek or German or what have you, all of those languages have nouns that are inflected according to their masculine, feminine, or in some cases, neuter gender. Okay. When they made that change, I was warning my parents, everybody that would listen to me, watch. Eventually, they're going to try and force you to change the way that you refer to other people. They're going to reduce sexuality to a mere linguistic property. And here we are. We can't figure out our pronouns, and we can't figure out what bathroom to use. So,
and I'm scared for the future for my daughter who is
I don't blame you.
5 months old. You know what I mean?
Uh-uh.
I'm scared.
I look. I don't know. I'm glad in a certain sense that I don't have kids because, especially, a daughter. Because I would be one of these overprotective dads, and I'd be in prison. I would have committed felonies by now.
Got my girl dad shirt on.
There,
My
there
girl
you
dad shirt
go.
on. But
There you go.
I wouldn't change anything, Joseph. I wouldn't take she I love her to death. I wouldn't change anything.
Well, of course, but
But but my wife always like I would because I've been researching this for a while. I know I'm afraid of the future. But my wife wanted the typical nuclear type family. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
So she said, "You ready to jump?" I said, "Okay, honey, how high?" So we had to do the IVF route. Cost a lot
mm-hmm,
of money,
mm-hmm,
but yeah, I'm like I said, I'm afraid of the future, and this is a like you were saying, this is a word like you have people study these things and they put like
mm-hmm.
etymologist. It's a word play.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that makes me sick. Like, and I don't know. But let's go.
The game of Gnosticism. Let me simplify it for everybody. Gnosticism is an early Christian heresy, and it was really the Gnostics that invented this game of you show your agreement, or you demonstrate your raised consciousness by using language and particular words in a particular way that we dictate to you. So, in other words, when you use their language, it is itself an act of surrender. This is why I was warning 40 years ago that when the business of so called inclusive pronouns was simply a Gnostic tactic. To this day, I will never use any other pronoun for the pars pro toto usage other than he and him. And sorry, ladies, I include you in my thinking when I use pronouns in that way. That's the way the language works. However, if I surrender that and start using so called inclusive language, I'm surrendering to somebody else who's dictating to me on the basis of some really cultural Marxist agenda, what proper language is going to be. And that goalpost will always change. Please hear this now. Once you accept that, that goalpost will always change because this is the mechanism by which they maintain their power and keep everybody jumping from goalpost to goalpost. We have to keep changing the language, and eventually people are going to catch on that knowledge itself collapses because language has now distanced itself so far from reality. So, folks, don't even get on that train because that's a train that's a dead end to nowhere. The Bolsheviks tried this in Russia. I don't know if you're familiar with that episode, but there
Have
are.
you ever read this book, Fire in the Minds of Men?
Oh, yeah, of course I have. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. James Billington.
Yep.
Um, yeah, that's in fact that's a book well worth reading because he talks about some of these programs and the linguistic tactics that they use to obtain and then maintain power. But ultimately, it's always an agenda that fails because ultimately the language distances itself so far from reality that communication, truth, and things like this begin to break down. Um, the other thing I've noticed contributing to this, Michael, and I know I'm just rambling on and on
I
here,
love it.
but
I've never seen you. You always get fired up when we talk about this
well,
transhuman,
that's
whatever.
because doggone it, I'm
I,
mad.
I am too. I am too. And this transgenderism is part of this transhumanism.
Of course it is. Of
So,
course it is.
and we will discuss more of the transgender thing connection with it later on the show. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Well,
interrupt you.
I forget what I was going to say now, but
Damn, I interrupted the myth, the legend here.
uh,
Maybe
oh
it'll
boy,
come back
it'll
too.
come
It'll
back to
come
me,
back
I'm sure.
too. So, and I really hate to interrupt, but I had to say that. But so let's go and move forward just a little bit,
Mm,
and if it pops into your head, go ahead and mention it. But and we will bring in the transgender thing more to discussion because it is part of the. I like to connect the AI and the transhuman together because it's one and the
mhm,
same.
mhm,
You know, deep down, it's
mhm,
one and the same. So this is an article. Let me go ahead and screen share it. It's nothing new. You see here. There we go. Can you see it?
mhm. Yes.
Okay. Elon Musk and others urge AI pause, citing risk to society. You know,
Mhm,
um, and you got different people out there. Different. You have BBC, Elon Musk, among experts urging a halt to AI training.
mhm,
So my thing is, Joseph,
mhm,
I understand that. Yes, it's getting out of control.
mhm,
Artificial intelligence is getting out of control, but and the dangers and the risk because you're having kids committing suicide because they're in deep conversations with this algorithm AI bot, whatever, chat
mhm,
GPT, whatever it is. So let's say we put a halt to it, okay,
mhm.
or ban it. I don't know. You think other adversaries, other countries that wish to do harm on us, or you think they're going to put a halt on their AI? So who has the upper hand there?
No, but I'll tell you what my fear really is. And Musk himself was, I think, the first one to voice this fear a few years ago. And this fear is related to that second book I'm waiting for my publisher to publish that people are
Yeah,
going to have to read and ponder very carefully. But um, my fear, first of all, is if you look at the irrationality and just plain inhuman policy that our gerontocratic political class is currently up um, to me, the policies that Mr. Globaloney, the global elite of the West, are following are not policies that any rational human would follow. I want to repeat that because I'm going somewhere with it. The policies that Mr. Globalone, the technocrats of the West, are following, from domestic economic labor relations, market policies, monetary policies, geopolitics, diplomacy, none of the policies that they're following make any human rational sense. So my suspicion has been for the last 3 to 5 years, and I've voiced this suspicion with Catherine Fitz, and on occasion she's tended to agree that things are so nutty. I mean, look at this
That's the
grifting.
understatement.
Yeah, well, look at this grifting, senile, demented, corrupt, criminal shill for communist China that we have in the White House now. And I'm being kind, folks. The policies that they're following make no sense. So my suspicion is somewhere they are gaming out, or following a supercomputer gaming out world scenario prediction scenarios. In other words, they're listening to an AI, so to speak, already. That's what I think. And I first started thinking this, Mike, when I was watching all of these flash crashes occur on Wall Street. Because as we know, most of the trading in the stock markets or in equities markets or commodities markets now is being done by computers that are simply trading automatically. They're not, forget about this image that you have of the trader on the floor of the stock exchange or the Chicago Board of Exchange waving slips of paper and shouting, and, that still goes on, yes, but the vast bulk of it is being done by computers. Now, what that means, secondly, is not only is Mr. Technocrat following the predictions of computers, and let's remember the old proverb about computers: garbage in, garbage out. You program what you get. Okay. So in other words, during the flash crashes, we're not watching actual human market activity. We're watching computer market activity. So in other words, even the markets themselves are no longer reflective. Please understand the importance of this. The markets themselves are no longer reflective of human evaluations of risk, of investment, of opportunity. This is being done by computers. That's crucial. If you want to know why markets make no sense, I would aver that it's because you have computers doing the risk assessment and the investing. And occasionally we get the hiccup with a flash crash. Such and such a stock all of a sudden plummets within a matter of milliseconds in value and then springs right back up. No, this is not human market activity. Now let's add Elon Musk. Remember what he said a few years ago? I worry, he said, that in creating these computers, they might get so sophisticated that they transduce an entity into the system. Now, what he's doing there is
almost like a rogue algorithm.
The old movie, the Lawnmower Man scenario, all of this stuff. And quite honestly, I worry about that too, because if you've been following consciousness studies in the last few years, one of the things that is a theory is the emergent property theory, that in self-organizing random systems, you can get to a point where the neural net becomes so sophisticated, bang, it wakes up and becomes self-conscious. Now, we're finding out the more we study. Before we came on the air, I just read a study about octopuses, which are one of my favorite creatures because they're so dang smart.
Mm-hmm.
They literally learn by watching each other. Well, come to discover, they finally managed to plant electrodes in an octopus so that they could study their brain waves. And come to find out, this is in the last few days. This is not even in the last few weeks or months. In the last few days, they discover that octopus have brain functions, brain waves, very similar to the human brain hippocampus. Now, you know, uh, that's a little indicator, folks. As
Mm.
far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I think Musk is right. I think there is a danger that with enough sophistication, the complexity of the neural net itself that they are trying to create in these computers could actually wake up. And I'm not above assuming that if we're thinking in terms of they're already listening to world gaming scenarios that are making predictions and telling them, well, do this, do that. I'm not I'm not above thinking that maybe that system itself has already woken up, so to speak, or in Musk's scenario has transduced some sort of entity into the system. I think the crazier the world gets, the more that that scenario looks likely. Anyway, I'll stop
Well, no, well
yammering.
said. And I try my best, especially with those in-person interviews, not to interrupt because you get on a flow, you get fired up, and that's when you speak. That's when you're preaching the best, man. Um, it's true. But so this rogue algorithm, this
Mhm.
entity, whatever it is, do you think it seeks? I know this is far out. This is hypothetical. Do you think it? And you mentioned consciousness. Do you think it possibly needs it's seeking out a form of consciousness or something to emanate what it's like to be human? So maybe one day, and then you have you certain elites in the world that are trying to merge the singularity with consciousness into machines,
Yes.
and maybe that's when it will get really scary. I just interviewed a researcher. It's not getting off topic, but he believes that AI machines or AI will never have consciousness or get to that singularity because he believes that ultimately they will be they will be controlled by certain figureheads, by these these rogue factions in the world. But I kind of disagree with that. I think because think about 20 years ago, Joseph,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, 20
Mm-hmm.
years ago, with how things are now,
Mm-hmm.
with AI, with Chat GPT, everything. You can even talk about transgenderism, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You would think all these things are crazy. You're a lunatic. You're a sci-fi novelist. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
So who's to say that, let's say like 20, 30 years ago, with how everything is now, people would think you're crazy for even talking about these things, but they're coming through fruition now. So what if right now, speculating with AI coming, getting consciousness or certain elites
Mm-hmm.
trying to merge consciousness with machines, what if people think just like they did then that that's crazy, that will never happen? Okay, wait 20, 30 more years.
Okay. I think the biggest problem with this question is a philosophical one.
It is very philosophical, yes.
Well, let me explain what I mean by it. The modern West departed from an ancient, more or less universal view of things when it decided that the best metaphor of the universe was a machine. Now, this happens circa the year 1500, right at the tail end of the Renaissance and the beginning of the early Enlightenment. And it's people like Rene Descartes, Isaac Newton that are pushing this kind of new mechanistic view of the universe. The older view, the older view was that the universe is not mechanism, but organism. So that you would have even church fathers like St. Maximus the Confessor, who would say things like, okay, the universe is a microcosm, or pardon me, man is a microcosm, a little universe, and the universe is a makanthropos, a large man. So their view of consciousness and what was possible in that type of world is very, very different than ours. They had no difficulty whatsoever conceiving of the idea that there were forms of life that were entirely bodiless and immaterial, angels, demons, or if you're, an ancient Greek pagan, elemental spirits, and so on and so forth. They had no difficulty with this whatsoever. So if you look at the vast history of humanity, it's us in the modern West that are in the definite minority with this kooky idea that we, and we alone in all of living nature, are conscious beings. Nuts. Nuts. I can tell you my little dog has some sort of consciousness. It's not human, but she does have some awareness of herself and her environment and responds to me, and so on and so forth. So I think the thing that has hurt this discussion is many people are trying to have this discussion and they're still living in that Renaissance, early Enlightenment mechanistic universe. And I think, quite frankly, if you follow physics, especially certain areas of physics and what's going on now, that universe is being swept away so fast it's not even funny, which brings us back to AI. I have no difficulty that a machine might be conscious. I have no difficulty with that whatsoever. I mean, my word, my computer acts weird all the time. But here's my problem with that. Consciousness doesn't necessarily mean emotional maturity or morality. That's the key. And if you look at what the transhumanist people are trying to do, Charles Lieber at Harvard was just sentenced, the guy that was involved in the Wuhan, and he was a nanochemist. But what he was trying to do was invent sensors that could be injected into people that would get in and pass the blood-brain barrier so that you would carry around your little medical sensors, a la Bill Gates. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting that they're trying all of this stuff out. And you know why I think they're trying to do this? I think they're trying to teach AI how to think and respond in an emotional way like human beings. And so far, they're unsuccessful. Well, yeah, duh. My little dog may be conscious and may have some smarts, but she's a dog, not a human.
So not to interrupt, so maybe not right now they can't create or merge a human consciousness with machines and AI, but what about manufacturing Toys R Us version of consciousness?
Bingo. That's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Is if these things become conscious, if they wake up, a la Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, science fiction authors were writing about this stuff decades ago. And in his scenario, it's very interesting to see what happens, because he's telling people to stop thinking about consciousness in solely human terms and stop thinking that we're the only definition of consciousness. That's the big error that begins to occur in the West at the end of the Renaissance with this mechanistic universe idea. Stop and throw that out. Well, if that's the case, then yeah, can an AI be conscious? Yes. Might it be conscious already? Perhaps to some degree. Is it going to behave like a human? No, of course not. It's a machine. Asking it to behave like a human or to understand human emotion or intelligence is, that's nutty. You might be able to teach it certain things, like you can teach your dog or your cat or what have you, and they're going to do certain things that you teach them, but they're still going to be a bird or a dog or a cat or a horse. you know
So basically, you're saying that, and you kind of mentioned something about it, that we have these non-player characters that are emotionless and immoral,
Yes,
just zombies that are walking the
yes,
earth in
yes,
DC. And who's
yes.
so this artificial intelligence and this AI is already, I would say, more conscious than
Yeah.
these
Well,
these
these
non-player
people,
characters, you know.
these people are responding. They're being trained. This is my whole point. They're being trained by their technology to think and act in a certain way. And that way is increasingly inhuman. So how do you remedy the situation? Turn the damned thing off. Talk to your wife, talk to your friend, go on a walk, do human things and
That's not
rehuman. It's not hard.
that's not woke enough to talk like that.
Well, yeah, I know it's not woke enough, and as far as I'm concerned, screw that. It's I ain't I ain't gonna be woke. I'm sorry. And the reason why is wokery is inhuman, and we're seeing that it's inhuman. We've since when was it okay for men to try out in women's sports just because they have their own little mental problem going on? You know, I don't get it.
Well, and I don't want to get on that just yet, but you make a good point. And remember back in early 2000s, man, remember
Yeah.
Major League Baseball, that they were talking about the, the steroids and
Yes.
performance enhancing drugs was
Yes.
huge with Sammy
Yes.
Sosa, Mark McGuire, and Barry
Yep.
Bonds and all that.
Yep.
And that was cheating. So why is it not cheating now?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
but well, yes, but you raise the good point. The goalposts in any Gnostic system that attempts to manipulate, please hear me, that attempts to manipulate reality through manipulations of language. Any system like that must constantly move the goalposts. You're always going to be on shifting sand, and in such a system there is no morality. There are no boundaries. There's no good behavior. There's no evil behavior. There's just behavior and chemistry. And, if you want to try that experiment one more time, humanity, go ahead. I'm not going to be a part of it.
Mm. So sorry, I was texting my wife, very unprofessional, because I was telling her you can come in the living room because I think the baby just ate, so she's quiet. You can go in she's in the bedroom way back there, but on the other side of the house. But so what role? I was going to ask you this a while ago, but I did not want to interrupt your flow because, like I said, you start spilling it out when you get fired up. So what role do you see? And this was the note I took for this. What role do you see transhumanism and artificial intelligence playing in shaping the future of jobs, schools, universities, etc.? Are we already on this exponential path to no return, this road of no return, Joseph? And yes, I know these things are already taking place in job schools and universities and etc. But I feel like the technologies we see in those places are just training wheels like that on a bicycle. What happens when those training wheels are taken off? And you kind of talked about that a little bit.
In all honesty, it's very difficult. I've got several different scenarios in my mind as to what might happen.
Give us what your gut tells you. I know some of this is hypothetical, but like I said,
My gut
2030.
tells my gut tells me that at some point enough of humanity is going to have had it and just rise up and throw the whole thing in the dustbin. Now, how that's going to happen, I have no idea. Um, I think that there is a cultural, spiritual aspect to this whole thing, that we're dealing with people, especially in the United Soviet Socialist States of America. We're dealing with people who are in power and who will not relinquish power, nor will they compromise their nutty ideological position. So the only thing that I see that can happen in that situation is a crack up. And by crack up, I don't even know exactly how that's going to happen. Will it be Civil War 2.0? Maybe. Will it be both sides agree to go their separate ways and create whatever type of civilization they want to create? Maybe. I see increasing signs that a sort of parallel economy, a sort of parallel culture or system is emerging. As you know, I'm watching more and more states in the United States just absolutely say no to the federal government. And I don't see that trend changing. So what that tells me is everybody sees we're headed for a crack up, and some states are taking steps to put necessary things into play so that some sort of governance structure and cohesion can continue. So I honestly don't know what is going to happen. Are we always going to have transhumanist nuts trying to impose that vision on the world? Yes, we are. Um, how it's going to take shape in the future, I don't know. We're seeing something, however, in the world, particularly in countries like Russia. I want to talk about Russia because Russia is very important. Russia went through the atheistic, communist, Marxist, materialistic cosmology stage. And that was a system that was imported to Russia. It's essentially a Western system. It was not grown on Russian soil. It was not Russian intellectuals that came up with this system. It was a German Jewish nut by the name of Karl Marx that came up with the system. And it was imposed on Russia largely with a lot of Western help. So the Russians suffer through this system for, 80 plus years, and they just finally get fed up, go away, and they throw it off. Now, if you go to Russia today, what you see is a very interesting country because it is not attempting to return to Tsarist times, although you'll notice a definite uptick in the use of symbolism from that period of Russian history surrounding even Vladimir Putin. The dress uniforms of the guards in the Kremlin, Mike, are the dress uniforms of the Preobrazhensky Prakat regiment. That's the Tsar's old personal guard. Okay. So, in other words, the Russians are telling you something here. They are building churches and mosques and synagogues in Russia at a breathtaking clip with government help. They rebuilt the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow, which Stalin blew up. They rebuilt it on its original ground.
What is that telling you?
That's telling me that Russia is attempting to create or is engaged in another experiment. And the experiment is, can we become the first postmodern state? Can we become a state that is fully engaged technologically and so on with the modern world, yet retain our traditional Russian culture. That's what they're trying to do. No one understands this in the West, particularly the idiots in Swampington, D.C. They don't get it. In fact, they suspect it, but they don't know enough about it, so they hate it. They've got to stop it, because if that is successful, the global dream collapses, because that same approach can be taken by the Islamic world. It can be taken by the Vedic world in India. It can be taken by the Confucian world in China. So, in other words, I think you're watching this similar experiment spread to all these other countries. They look at the modern West and they see nothing but corruption, as a result of the unbridled materialism of modern Western crony capitalism, as I like to call it, and they say, enough, we don't want it. We want our sons and daughters to grow up in sane human environments, be it Muslim or Hindu or Russian Orthodox or what have you. And you can't blame them. The West is going nuts,
So
and they're
so
saying no.
so Russia, they see a they're getting a vision of the future
Yes,
and how this road of no return is going with AI and transhumanism.
right.
Um, so they're
And
trying to
they're
get up
saying no.
and they're trying to get upper hand to where they can survive this if there is, let's say, I don't know, this is
Uh,
probably a bad, but like a
let me
with
interrupt
machines and
you. Let
humans.
me interrupt you and give you an illustration of what they're up to. Okay. And I think this will become immediately relevant. When we were growing up, our parents would tell us things, when we would want to argue with our parents would eventually shut down the argument and say, just do it this way because I said so.
Or a backhand of the
Do it this way because I said, well, why are they saying so? Because they know that further argument at some point is pointless, because you're dealing with people that really haven't learned the lesson you're trying to teach. And this can be applied culturally. The United States has given up its cultural authority, and therefore everybody gets to argue. What Russia is doing is they're saying, no, don't argue with me. It's this way or the highway. Does that make Russia authoritarian? Yes, you betcha. But it's authoritarian in the old cultural sense that a parent uses with their kids. That's what's going on. In the United States, we have no authority whatsoever. See the difference?
I do
And
exactly.
this is quite frankly the ugly truth that's been squatting in the middle of this country since the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. It's everybody for themselves, the culture, morality, and so on be damned. It's the hustle. How much can I get out of it, and how much can I game the system, and so on and so forth. This is why it will fail. It will fail. It's failing now. And if you think another election cycle is going to fix it, I've got bad news for you. It will fail.
And of course, I still want to. Well said, Joseph. You continue to mind blow me with this, and the way you speak in, I don't know, philosophical ways and means is just an accurate way of describing how. But I love how you lay everything out. But do so basically with Russia,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to get too political because I still,
Mhm.
well, it's all involves politics. I know that, you know that, but I still want to stay on the AI and transhumanism
Mhm.
thing. But
Mhm.
when you have a media that used to, especially the Democratic Party, that used to be against war.
Mhm.
You remember back in 2001,
Wait,
2003,
I think I know where you're going with this, and
I think you do.
let me interrupt again.
Go ahead. This show's about
We
you, not me.
we are in a position where we're now watching the modern commie-crat party, as I like to call it. Thank you, Senator McCarthy. We're watching a Democratic Party that has no room for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You think they're going to kill him? Wipe him out?
Listen, if I were him, I would be very concerned about it because he speaks his mind. He's not on board with all this nuttery.
He's the old school Democrat.
He's the old school Democrat, and and nobody's going to shut him up. Um, and by the way, he doesn't need their money; he's got his own. you
Well, you
know?
know how they're attacking him by censoring him.
Oh,
CNN,
I know. I
you
listen.
know,
I absolutely know. I bought 10 copies of his book, The Real Anthony Fauci. Which, if you folks haven't read it, go buy it and read it. I gave them away for Christmas. I, I thought, wow, this is a book. But yeah, if you've got no room for the Kennedys in your party, or to listen to them, then that I if I were him, I'd go found my own political party.
so
It's anyway. I
so well, let me briefly say this before we move on. And it
uh
kind of does all it, man, it's all an intertangled spider's web, everything. But before we move on with AI and transhumanism and that, here's my prediction. And I'm sure it might be other people that's talked about it. I don't know. But my scary prediction, they're going to continue to censor RFK Jr.
mhm,
And what they're going to do, they know that the downfall mentally, the mental psychosis that Joe Biden has, they know that he is lacking popularity and all that. He's only popping up 10 to 15 minutes a day. So they're going to give us a wild card, possibly.
mhm.
Possibly. This is the prediction. And either this go around or next go around, they're going to bring in Michelle Obama, and that'll continue that Obama train. And then possibly Hillary Clinton will be on the cabinet somewhere. I don't know, Secretary of State again or something.
Mhm.
And they're going to continue with this global Roni agenda that you talk about.
Well, one way or the other, they're going to try and continue it. But as you're pointing out, they're running out of people.
That's my
You'll
wild
notice
card prediction. Yes. Yeah.
you'll notice something very interesting about the Western political class. I knew Boris Johnson when I was at Oxford. I knew him personally. I sat at tables, 3 feet across from him, talked with him. Um, the problem with the current political class in virtually every country, maybe with the exception of France and Italy, is you're dealing with a gerontocracy. Joe Biden is an old man. Trump is an old man. Chuck Schumer is an old man. Nancy Pelosi is an old woman. Kevin McCarthy's not a spring chicken. When I was a kid, the president of the United States was 41 or 2 years old, John Kennedy.
Bill
In other
Clinton,
words,
44 or something like that,
Bill
or
Clinton, yeah.
something like that.
So, yeah, the more they cling to power, the older they get. And eventually they're just going to, they're going to expire and die. And the thing is going to collapse simply through inertia because they're clinging so tightly to power. Look at Klaus, der Hochklaus Baron von Bloschwab, as I like to call him. von Bombburst. Here's another old dude that thinks he's super smart that's trying to run the world, and he's just an old dude. No, these people are has-beens. And it's a measure. Yeah, the Democrats may try and pull all that sort of stuff, but the problem is they're running out of people. The younger generation are epitomized by Kamala Harris. And talk about someone who can't string an intelligent thought together, and she's trying desperately. I mean, you can see her trying so hard it hurts. She's trying desperately to sound profound. She just can't do it.
That's why I think they're going to bring in, because you're talking about the age, and Michelle Obama.
Well,
either this go round, next go round. She's still fairly young compared to all these.
She's still fairly young, and at least she can string a sentence together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The rest of them,
and maybe we'll discuss more of this political upside down nightmare, this dichotomy, that whenever this be one of the other topics we discuss in detail when I go see you to discuss this in-person interview face to face. So and we kind of, you briefly discussed this a little bit in a roundabout way. So there are concerns that the pursuit of transhumanist technologies and post-human ideals could lead to a technotopia in which the wealthy and powerful have access to advanced technologies and allow them to transcend the limitations of their biology. So while the rest of humanity is left behind, how do you see this playing out, Joseph? And what steps can we take to ensure that the benefits of advanced technologies are shared equally without bringing us to a total annihilation? What's up, guys? Michael James with Beyond the Forbidden. If you want to receive extra content that's not viewed anywhere else, support Beyond the Forbidden on Patreon to receive plus content that is only exclusive to members of Beyond the Forbidden. Content like the full 2-hour podcast, bonus shows, full-length video interviews, behind-the-scenes footage with guests, and much more. So what do you have to lose? Go to patreon.com/Beyond the Forbidden. That's patreon.com/Beyond the Forbidden and become a member of Beyond the Forbidden for just $5 a month. And also check the description for the links.